The spiral on the old stove glowed unevenly, flickering, now dimming, now flaring red again, as if it refused to work, just like the rest of this roadside diner by the highway. Valentina, in her washed-out apron that had once been white but was now gray, leaned over the fish she had just dumped onto the scarred countertop from an old icebox. It was barely recognizable as sea bass. It stared at the ceiling with its one remaining cloudy eye, its indifferent, lifeless gaze matching the spirit of the place. The door behind her slammed, and Petr Semyonovich, the owner of the establishment where Valentina had recently begun working, burst into the kitchen. A loud man with a barrel of a belly and a face perpetually flushed, as if he boiled daily in his own curses and spittle. "Where is she?" he bellowed, looking around. Spotting Valentina, he jabbed a finger at her. You're supposed to be the cook here, or whatever you are. Get moving." He loomed closer, hissing threateningly. "Today's lunch better be a hit. Got it? Some big shots from Moscow are here, throwing money around. They said they want fish soup and fish, but fancy. And our head chef, God forgive me, has been on a bender for 3 days. You're the last one standing. Make sure the food's edible, or I'll throw you out. Remember the door?" Valentina didn't lift her eyes, only nodded. Petr Semyonovich took it as agreement. "Good. Now hurry up. Their table's booked for 8, and it's already 6:30. He turned and stormed back into the dining room, swearing loudly about how he had to do everything himself, as always. Valentina was left alone. The kitchen was stifling. The old exhaust fan droned helplessly, failing to clear the smoke or the stench of burnt grease. Dusty jars of stale spices, crystallized honey, an unlabeled bottle, and a hardened lemon with a whitened side sat crookily on the grimy shelves. It was all so far from where she had once been that it wasn't even funny. Not so long ago, her life had been entirely different. In Aix-en-Provence, amid refined streets and fragrant gardens, she had run her own restaurant, pristine tablecloths, silver cutlery, the murmur of polished conversation. It had been the backdrop of her daily life. Tables were booked months in advance, and her name was spoken in French with barely concealed admiration. In Le Paillon, they had given her standing ovations, and once, a gastronomic magazine had even dedicated a spread to her. Valentina Morozova, the sensation among female chefs, the Russian who conquered Provence. But all that glory, as it turned out, had been built on a powder keg. When the restaurant burned down, nothing remained but charred walls and emptiness. The insurance was supposed to cover the damage, but all the papers had been in her French husband's name. Without hesitation, he cashed in the payout, bought a ticket, and vanished. Barcelona welcomed him with open arms. Not a word was left for Valentina. He ignored her calls, hid from lawyers, and disappeared like smoke. The fire hadn't just destroyed the restaurant, it had burned her old life to the ground. Everything she had built over the years vanished in hours. Along with the money went her name and reputation. She had tried to salvage something from the flames, and as a reminder, her face bore scars not severe, but noticeable. Once, her face had graced advertisements and glossy magazines. Now, people looked at her with pitying glances that made her want to sink into the earth. She returned to her homeland. In the capital's restaurants, they politely turned her away. The kitchen, maybe, but not the dining room, the managers would say, avoiding her eyes. Humiliation after humiliation, glance after glance, until she gave up. She had no strength left to prove anything to anyone. All she wanted was quiet. That was how she ended up in the provinces with her sister. No gastronomic magazines reached here. No one knew her. The roadside cafe where she now worked wasn't for gourmets. People came in to buy cigarettes or ask for directions to the nearest gas station. Her sister had simply shrugged and said, "Be patient, little sister. It'll all work out. Just don't sit idle. Go earn a little." And now here she stood, in this hot, sooty kitchen. The fish lay before her, the clock ticking relentlessly toward 8, and somewhere in the dining room sat important guests and her boorish boss, demanding more than he had hired her for. She plunged her hands into cold water and began cleaning the fish slowly, almost ceremonially, as she had been taught years ago by a strict chef in Lyon who tolerated no haste yet demanded results. Her movements were precise, practiced. Even the old, dull fish scaler obeyed her hands. Her fingers numbed, but she didn't notice. All her attention was on the task. She searched for spices, bay leaves, pepper, anything for the broth, sorting through the dusty jars, squinting at the labels, prying off lids, sniffing the contents. Just then, a young waiter appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Wow, Aunt Val, you're cooking," he said hesitantly. "Need something?" "Bay leaves, pepper if there's any," Valentina replied, craning her neck without looking up from the shelves. The boy stepped closer, scanning the shelves, and began talking without waiting for a question, as if he'd been holding backwards all shift. "It's here somewhere, but Sonia, our guy, always messes everything up. No one but him knows where anything is. And now he's not even here. Can't reach him. The boss is losing it. Hardly any customers, no tips, nothing. At least with Sonia, you could joke around. Now it's just dead quiet." As he chattered, Valentina silently sorted through the jars. She found dried bay leaves in one, pepper in another. She straightened up and looked at the talkative helper. "Found them," she said calmly. "But I also need dry white wine. Any kind, as long as it's not sweet. And a fresh lemon, no mold." The boy flushed. "Where am I supposed to find that here?" "Just try," she said. He dashed out of the kitchen. Valentina boiled water with root vegetables, not just broth, but a foundation. She used onions that the previous cook had thrown out rotten on the outside, but firm within. She knew how to extract their best qualities: a sprig of wilted dill, a pinch of yellow pepper. Suddenly, the kitchen air filled with a scent no one in this building had smelled in a decade. The waiter returned breathless, holding out a bottle and a lemon. "Found them." "Good boy," Valentina said with a faint smile. 8 o'clock. At a table in the back of the dining rooms sat 6 men in dark suits, no ties, talking quietly. Their conversation was subdued, businesslike. The eldest, graying at the temples, flipped through a printed map marked in red. "There's a good plot near the bypass turnoff. Close to the highway, water, electricity, but the access road's too narrow," objected another. "A truck won't turn around." "Maria promised to approve widening the road," interjected a third. "They say the local owner, Petr, might sell part of the land. The cafe's a dump, but the location, just look at it." Petr Semyonovich, who had been lurking by the door, immediately stepped forward, grinning obsequiously. "Gentlemen, at last. Welcome. I hear you have serious plans, and rightly so. This is the best spot, nothing like the others. Flat land, great view, traffic like the Moscow Ring Road. If rebuilt this place with my own hands. The cafe's steady, and the kitchen top-notch. My chefs are like the best in Paris," he declared, smacking his lips and puffing out his chest. The investors exchanged glances. One eyed the peeling walls, another noticed the faded sign, a third raised his eyebrows. "Well, it's seen better days," the eldest said dryly. "We'll see about the kitchen." Of course. I've prepared everything," Petr fussed. "Today's menu, family-style fish soup and baked fish. I oversaw it myself. You'll lick your fingers clean." He clapped his hands. "Bring the first course, quick." The waiter rushed into the kitchen and seemed to vanish. Petr Semyonovich began pacing nervously. He had staked everything and feared losing. Finally, the waiter reappeared with a tray. The men in expensive jackets sipped the soup, spoonful by spoonful, in silence. One frowned as if about to speak but said nothing. Another raised his eyebrows, nodded slowly, took a sip of water, and said, "This is interesting." They began whispering, exchanging glances. Someone looked toward the kitchen. At last, the youngest turned to the cafe owner. "Who's your cook?" Petr mumbled, "Just some woman. A relative of the cashier's." "Call her out," the man said. Petr Semyonovich stormed into the kitchen, his eyes burning with rage, his face mottled. "What the hell did you cook, witch?" he hissed, flying at Valentina. "They're sitting out there, making faces, not saying a word. What did you feed them?" He raised his hand as if to strike, but only slammed the wall beside her head. Valentina flinched but didn't make a sound. His breath was heavy, reeking of alcohol, his voice venomous. He grabbed her arm and shoved her toward the door. "Go on, disgrace," he spat in her ear. "The gentlemen want to see you. Fix this yourself." Valentina wiped her hands on a towel and stepped into the dining room. She was met with silence. She took a step, and a faint sigh rippled through the room, as if someone had been both surprised and pitying. The harsh overhead light illuminated her scarred face, the pale burn marks stretching from her cheek to her neck, but her gaze was calm, tired yet steady. The young man at the end of the table stood first. "Did you make this soup?" he asked, intrigued. She nodded. It was he hesitated, searching for the word. "Remarkable. Such a pure taste, clarity, nothing extra. I'd say it's like a childhood memory you never had, but wish you did." The eldest man, the one with the map, stood up and applauded loudly. The others joined in. Petr Semyonovich froze against the wall, pale. He looked as if the ground had shifted beneath him. The gray-haired man narrowed his eyes. "Forgive me, but are you Valentina Morozova? From Lepion?" She paused for a second, then nodded slightly. "Yes, that was me." "No way!" he exclaimed in delight. "The sea bass fillet with lavender sauce, I still remember that taste. I proposed to my wife there." "Was that you?" She nodded again, slightly embarrassed. The men applauded. "This is the best fish soup I've had in 20 years, he said. Then, seriously, do you have a job? Petr Semyonovich, who had been hovering nearby, couldn't contain himself. "Well, she works for me." But Valentina was already looking at the investor, who continued, "We're launching a new gastronomic project in Moscow. An author's restaurant downtown, under a private brand. Not just any bistro. We need more than a chef, we need a soul. Understand? Would you lead the kitchen?" Petr Semyonovich, unable to hold back, lunged toward the table, forcing a confident smile. "Gentlemen, since everything's worked out so well, maybe we can discuss my offer for the plot. I own everything here, the building, the land, the kitchen, and this cook." The senior investor studied Petr's face, as if truly seeing him for the first time. "The kitchen may be yours, but this extraordinary woman is not," he said calmly, his words carrying such weight that the silence in the room became palpable. He turned to his colleagues and, after a pause, added, "I think we found everything we were looking for. There's no reason to get involved with this place." The others nodded. The young investor, not even glancing at Petr, said to his assistant, "Make a minimal offer to buy him out. He'll sign as soon as he realizes the only value here is already gone. Let him have his pennies. We don't need his kitchen, his team, or him." But Petr began, but his voice was instantly drowned out by the gray-haired man's stern gaze. "Without him," he repeated firmly. Then he turned slowly to Valentina, softening his expression, and nodded at her with respectful warmth. "Madame Morozova, it's time to begin our work." A week later, Valentina was on a train. Outside the window, fields, dirt roads, and occasional village houses with sagging roofs blurred past in the autumn mist. Ahead lay the unknown, but exhilarating. Behind her were the soot, the clatter of kitchenware, harsh voices, and the cruelty of strangers she had endured day after day. She sat by the window, clutching a batiste handkerchief, thinking about how strangely life's path could unfold. What road must one travel to meet oneself again? Not the old, confident, famous self who had shone on magazine pages, but the one who rises again quietly, steadily, inexorably. She recalled that memorable day at the roadside cafe. The young waiter, the one who had run for wine and lemons, had caught up with her at the exit, nervous, speaking haltingly, but with genuine excitement. "I'm sorry you're leaving, but now I want to learn to cook like you, so everyone will be amazed." She had smiled, patted his shoulder, and wished him luck. He had nodded awkwardly, as if he had just believed that something new and wonderful could begin just like that. She remembered how her sister had come to see her off at the station. Wordlessly, she had hugged her, as if she knew, no words needed. But then she had whispered, "Just don't be afraid anymore. You've already been through everything." Valentina's eyes stung, but she only nodded and boarded the train without looking back. The train rocked gently, rhythmically. Valentina closed her eyes and allowed herself to smile. The road lay ahead, and her heart was at peace.